Hello and welcome to the detailed Flins guide. Flins is the second 5-star of Nod-Krai and a burst-focused lunar charged carry. In this video, I will explain his kit and playstyle, as well as talk about his team options, artifacts, weapons and constellations. Starting with what he does. Flins is an electro problem with his attack talent not having anything special to it. The elemental skill makes him enter a special stance, with normal and charge attacks being infused with electro and gaining partial resistance to interruption. Using the skill itself doesn't generate energy, as the particle generation is tied to the normal attacks on a 2-second cooldown. During the skill's uptime of 10 seconds, you are able to use a special skill with a 6-second cooldown that deals electro damage. Both the skill and attacks deal fairly low damage, as the majority of Flins' DPS comes from his burst. Speaking of, after using the elemental burst, Flins will deal a hit of electro damage, followed by a couple hits of lunar charge electro damage. Now, how does lunar charge damage differs from normal talent damage? Lunar charge damage coming from talents inherits some properties from transformative reactions. These are ignoring enemy defense, as well as additional scaling with elemental mastery instead of damage bonus. The damage also is multiplied by 3. All of this essentially adds up to lunar charge talent damage being around 10 times higher than normal talent damage with the same motion value. For example, Ineffa's passive having allowed 40% lunar charge attack scaling is equivalent to around 400% normal talent motion value. Continuing with the burst description. The burst will deal additional hits of lunar charge talent damage if there are thunder clouds, the effect of the lunar charge reaction, on the field, and the party is in Ascended Gleam. And now, what is Ascended Gleam? Nod-Krai introduced new property applied to your whole party, Moon Sign. Your Moon Sign level starts at 0 when you have no Nod-Krai characters on the team, and it increases to Nascent Gleam with 1 Nod-Krai character and to Ascended Gleam with 2 or more. That is it for his normal burst, which is not very good, however he has a special mini burst. Within 6 seconds after using your special skill, you can use the mini burst, which works effectively the same as his normal burst. It also deals more damage when you are in Ascended Gleam and there are thunder clouds around. This effect over doubles its damage and is the main reason why you always want to be on this Moon Sign level. The mini burst deals around the same damage as the big burst, with only costing 30 energy instead of the full 80. Since you will always want to be using 2 mini bursts per rotation, you normally won't have enough energy to use the big burst. However, if you're generating more energy than you're using, you will be able to use it once in a while. The thing is, when you open your combo with a big burst, you still need to generate 60 energy before your uptime is over to use your 2 mini bursts. In order to do that, you will need to reach an ER breakpoint of 175% instead of your normal requirement of 125%, with some weapons lowering that breakpoint. But more on that in the weapon section. Moving on to his passives. Flins A1 gives him 20% lunar charge damage bonus when in Ascended Gleam. The A4 gives EM based on his attack up to 160, capping out at 2000 attack, which is trivial to achieve. He also has a Moon Sign passive granting up to 14% base lunar charge damage bonus based on his attack, with a cap also at 2000. But how do you actually play him? The most important things when playing Flins is using your 2 mini bursts and generating enough energy to do so. Your typical rotation will go as follows. You use your supports, starting with the ones with the longest ability durations and ending with the lowest. After swapping into Flins and using your skill, you can use 1 normal attack to generate an energy particle. Then you want to use your special skill into a mini burst, use normal attacks until the cooldown is over, and repeat until the skill duration ends. If you're using the big burst when it's ready, you want to use it right after the first normal attack. Then continue your normal combo with delaying the mini bursts until you have enough energy to use them. In terms of talents leveling priority, the burst is most important as it is responsible for most of your DPS. Skill levels aren't doing much, but are worth leveling at least to level 6, and you can go for more if you want to. The attack levels are completely worthless, as his electro normal attacks scale off of his skill level. For Artefact Stats, on your sense you want attack or ER if it gets you to the second ER requirement without going over it. EM is fine as well, but worse. For the goblet it's the same, except you can't have ER there. On the circlet you just won't crit. On the substats, the priority is as follows: ER until you reach the base requirement, crit, attack percent, ER until you reach the second requirement, EM, and flat attack. Moving on to artifact sets you want on Flins, Night of the Sky's Unveiling is Flins' best in slot. It provides EM, lunar reaction damage bonus, and a lot of crit rate. However, if it makes you overcap on crit rate, it loses some value. Malicious can be as good as his best in slot, provided you have all the stacks. The only way to do that is by lining Furina and a healer, but unless you're already doing that, it's not worth changing your team. Thundering Fury doesn't work very favorably for Flins, as it reduces the 16 second skill cooldown instead of the 6 second special skill one. Still, it allows you to do 14 second rotations instead of 16 second ones. This makes it not that far off the best in slot. It also slightly lowers your particle generation, so you might need to build a little bit more ER. You will need to play supports with shortened cooldowns like Aino, and with Inefa you will need to alternate between skill and burst every rotation. Gilded Gilms and Tupis Tupis are fairly similar to each other and about 10% worse than his best in slot. For your support sets, on Animo characters you always want to be on VV without exceptions. On other characters however you got couple options. The new set Serenade is the best supportive set, and you can get it in the same domain as Flins' best in slot. TOM, Noblesse and Scroll are all about as good as each other, so it doesn't matter which one you use as long as you can proc them. Instructor is also fine on supports that don't need to beat a lot of stats. On screen you can see a weapon ranking made by Zojev77, to which link is in the description. I will only talk about weapons that can use a comment or further explanation. Prospector's Shovel is the new Nod-Krai craftable and the best 4-star option aside of the Battle Pass weapons. Blood-Soaked, Flins' signature, is his best in slot. It either reduces your base ER requirement to 0 or the second one to around 140%. If you however already have some ER rolls and are not going for the big burst playstyle, these rolls are wasted, making the weapon worse. Engulfing alone brings you to the second ER breakpoint if you're reaching the first one without it. Homa is your second best option if you are below 50% HP, aka if you're using Furina and not using a healer. Favonius Lens allows you to use the big burst every 4 rotations, but it is worth to build around 165% ER to use it every other rotation. However, you need at least R4 for the lower cooldown. It also helps with ER requirements of the rest of your team. Before we get into the teams, we need to talk about the new Nod-Krai Resonance introduced in 6.0. This resonance activates when your party is in Ascendant Gleam and gives you lunar reaction damage bonus up to 36% with the exact amount depending on your non-Nod-Krai characters. After a non-Nod-Krai character uses an elemental skill burst, the party will gain the buff based on their stats and element. For Pyro, Electro and Cryo characters it scales off of their attack, for Hydro their HP, for Geo defense, and for Animo as well as Dendro EM. It only takes into account one of your character's stats, so there is no benefit to using 2 Nod-Krai characters from this buff. You will typically get around 20% bonus this way. Flins' teams consist of a Hydro slot, assumed to trigger Lunar Charge for his burst to release full damage, Electro battery option to generate energy for his burst as well as provide some buffs and or personal damage, and a buff slot for Shred and or other buffs. For the Hydro slot, there is no character that both has good numbers and synergizes well with Flins. First we have Aino. She is a Nod-Krai character, so if you don't have Inefa, she is necessary to be in Ascendant Gleam. At C6 she is your best option, but only by a very small margin, and at C0 she is still fine. Yalan extends your rotation by 2 seconds, and Flins doesn't really care about the damage percent buff. However, she is still a good option and only slightly behind Aino. Xingqiu. Slightly behind Yalan. Due to his long cooldowns, you can't burst every rotation. However, his skill still applies Hydro on its own, so you can alternate between it and the burst every rotation. Furina, another option that's only slightly behind C6 Aino. However, if you don't have a healer, which is the case in his premium team, she locks you at 50% HP. Her skill duration is 30 seconds, so you can use it every other rotation, and you don't wanna use her burst. If you're losing Homa, she is your best option as she activates its effect. Barbla, Kokomi and Sejuin are all wards, but if you want a healer, this is the best slot to replace. They all are slightly better than Aino, but they need R5 sack flags to work, and even then, you're reliant on triggering. I wouldn't get a new Hydro character for Flins, as it is good to keep in mind that Columbina will likely be a much better option in this slot, and our current options are very close anyways. This is however only speculation, as we don't have reliable leaks on her kit yet. Flins is a character very reliant on Inefa, with all your other options being at least 20% behind. There are many reasons why Inefa is so good in this slot. As Inefa is a Nod-Krai character, you don't need Aino when using her. She provides you with good personal damage and buffs as well as a shield. Flins' damage is heavily concentrated in 2 points. Inefa's consistent damage allows her to finish off low HP enemies so that you don't have to waste your burst on them. If you don't have Inefa, all your other options don't differ that greatly from each other. Orlon has some okay damage and buffs, there's not much to say about him. Jansan provides an attack buff, but extends your rotation by 2 seconds. Flins doesn't move a lot during his combo, but you can just run around in between using normal attacks to generate energy of cooldown. Sarah is a character that has many problems with Flins. The buff duration is short, only buffing the first burst. Due to her 20-second burst cooldown, you can only use it once every other rotation, and she has low particle generation, which may require you to build more ER. Despite all that, she is still a fine option. In the rotations with her, you open with her E and use the burst or charge attack just before swapping into Flins. Fischl has some personal damage, she is fine. You can use Cookie if you want a heal, but she doesn't provide you anything besides healing. Lastly, we have arguably the best non-Inefa option, if not for the fact that they're absolutely infuriating to play. And that is Electro MC. The very large amount of energy they provide you allows you to use the big burst every 2 or 3 rotations, when using EMC's burst every other rotation because of the 20-second cooldown. This however requires you to pick up the totems on Flins and not anyone else, which is hard to do and reliant on enemy RNG. I would not recommend this option to any sane person. For the buff slot, Sucrose is your best option as she provides the team with Shred as well as a huge EM buff. Shilonem provides worse buffs, but has healing if that's something you want. Bennett has healing as well, but worse buffs than Sucrose and Shilonen. Kazuha is basically a 3-star Sucrose, worse buffs and longer animations. Lanyan gives you a shield, however since shields don't stack, it's not useful if you're already using Inefa. Jansen can also be used in this slot, being about as good compared to Sucrose as in the battery slot compared to Inefa. C1 is a pretty strong con. It allows you to use 3 mini-bursts per rotation instead of 2 and refunds you some energy. The energy refund isn't enough to break even, so you need about 2 more lords of ER to make up for it. It also makes Sarah better as she can buff 2 out of 3 bursts instead of the normal 1 out of 2. C2 is also a good con. It gives you a couple additional hits of Rune Charge damage and decreases enemies' electro less. The additional hits can finish off low HP enemies without the need to use your burst. The last shred makes buffers that not provided better than they were before. C3 makes the burst a little better, it's alright. C4 gives you some stats but not much. C5 is so ass, it does not do anything. C6 is very good, giving you a big DPS increase and makes up for the previous cons being quite bad. But what should you go for? In terms of the SIG or cons question, both C1 and C2 are usually better than the SIG, but the weapon can be better if it doesn't make you overcap on crit at all. You should never go further than C2 unless you're getting his C6, as his C3, 4 and 5 are all not worth it on their own. Overall, Flins is a very good carry that's gonna help you with some staging onslaught bosses, favoring either Nod-Krai or electro damage, and will possibly get a buff with the release of Columbina. He is very reliant on Inefa, being usable but not very appealing option without her. And that is it. If there is anything I want to add post-upload, it will be in a pinned comment, so check if there is one. And thanks for watching.